Hi guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Steven's going to be teaching you how to play Gymnopédie number 1. So this has been one of my absolute favorite piano compositions, and I've got to give big props to Steven for transposing it so elegantly and beautifully onto the ukulele. So I've had a chance to play through the entire arrangement, and obviously it's a ton of fun to play, but I think one of the greatest things that's going to come from working on this arrangement is that you get to work on a beautiful piece of music that really focuses on sustain. So when you go back and you think about the performance that you just watched, every single note, every single chord beautifully rings into the next one. Now, if you're new to working on sustain, I'm going to put a link right here for a live lesson that we did that Matt Dahlberg taught, and it gives you a lot of the fundamental tips and tricks for working on building sustain in your playing. I'll also link that lesson in the description box below. So before we talk about the lesson, there's one big elephant in the room, and it's this. This arrangement is for low G ukulele, so make sure you grab the low G for this tune. So let's jump into talking about the lesson. So in this video, Steven's going to be teaching you the first half of the tune. If you want to learn the second half, you can do so by clicking this link or going to the site rockclass101.com and doing a search for Gymnopédie number 1. And on that page will also be the really cool interactive tab player. Now this is a really cool feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, you can slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a really great asset for learning this song that much easier. And of course there's also the printable tabs that you guys can print and keep for your records too. All of that will be on that page as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Steven to teach you how to play this tune, and then I'll see you at the end of the lesson.
What's up guys? In this lesson we're going to learn Gymnopédie number 1 by Erik Satie. Now this is just one of my absolute all-time favourite pieces of music. Apart from being absolutely beautiful, it's just a total masterpiece as well in my opinion. With it being quite a kind of sparse and minimalist piece of music, there's nowhere to hide with it. You know, every note has to be there for a reason, it has to be perfect, and that is absolutely the case with this piece. You know, even some of the more kind of experimental avant-garde sounds that Satie uses here, then you know they're all there for a reason and they all enhance the overall piece of music. So from a technique point of view, because this is quite a kind of sparse and minimalist arrangement, we're going to focus on sustain. We want to make sure that these notes are ringing out for as long as possible to really capture the essence and the beauty of this piece. Now, rhythmically, it's fairly straightforward. We're in 3/4 time with this one, but even in the busiest measures, we're still only playing those three quarter notes on beats 1, 2, and 3. That's as busy as it gets, and it's quite a slow and considered piece as well. You know, the pace at performance speed, we're looking at something around about 80 beats per minute, so quite chilled out, quite relaxed. So once you've got this one down, this one's going to be perfect after a hard day at work, just to come home, kick back, and play this. Just really chilled out piece of music. So we've split this piece into 4 sections. We've got the A and the B section, which we'll look at in this video, and then we'll tackle the C and D sections in the next video. So if you're ready to go, grab your ukulele and let's get into it. So the first 4 measures make up this A section or intro, and with it being just an intro, we want to make sure we're playing these measures just a little bit quieter, a little bit softer, ready for measure 5 where the melody comes into play. We'll play that a little bit louder when we get to that point, but we want to make sure that these first 4 measures are just nice and gentle, just to lead in to the piece. So rhythmically, we're just playing on beats 1 and 2. So all 4 measures, we're just playing beats 1 and 2, and then letting it all ring out over beat 3. And all we're doing for these first 4 measures is alternating between these 2 really pretty chords. We've got a C major 7 chord, and then we've got this G major 7 chord. Just really stunning chords that go together really, really well. They're just nice to play on their own, I think. Just lovely chords. So each measure is going to kick off with these alternating bass notes, the C and the G. So on measure 1, we're starting with the C major 7 chord. So we're going to hold that. We've got the A string being held at the 2nd fret there. You could use your 1st finger for that. You could use your 2nd finger. As you play these first 4 measures and alternate between these 2 chords, you just use whichever fingering kind of suits you best, which is more comfortable, whichever you think sounds the best. For me personally, I use the first finger throughout, the index finger for both these chords, the C major 7 and the G major 7. I just kind of slide that up to a bar of the first 3 strings, ready for the G major 7. But the second, switch into the first, that works perfectly well as well. Okay, so on measure 1, we're going to play this open C for beat 1, and we'll play that with the index finger on the right hand because we'll use our kind of standard finger picking techniques with our right hand here. So we'll be having the thumb on the G string, and then the index on the C, middle on the E, and the ring finger on the A. So our first note, our first beat is this open C played with the first finger whilst holding the C major 7 chord. That's beat 1. And then on beat 2, whilst that C note is ringing out, we'll play this double stop here, the first and second strings with the second and third fingers, and we'll play that on beat 2. And all that's just going to ring out over beat 3. So a nice simple first measure to get us into this. We've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so on to measure 2, we are going to switch to a G major 7 chord, but we don't want to change our fingering here just yet because we want to make sure that all these notes are ringing out for as long as possible. We don't want to cut them off too early. So on to measure 2, we will play the open G in the bass on beat 1, but we'll still keep this C major 7 shape held for now, just before beat 2, so just before we're going to play the rest of that G major 7 chord, we'll move this up to this kind of 3/4 bar across the first 3 strings. Just use our first finger for that, put the pressure down, and then on beat 2, play those 3 notes together. First, second, and third, all at the 2nd fret there. But it's really important that we only put that bar on just when we need it, just as we're about to play it. Okay, that'll let everything ring out. So on measure 1, we had you see that move there just in the nick of time, just ready for beat 2, just before we're going to play it. Now in terms of playing those 3 notes together, we can just play them all together. That sounds perfectly good, but just to kind of spice this up a little bit, make it sound a bit more funky, we could add just like a little kind of, I don't even know what you call that, but it's like a little classical guitar technique where we pick all 3 strings but in really quick succession, so it sounds like they're kind of being played together, but it just separates them ever so slightly. So in terms of playing that, just the technique for that, what we could do is just have all 3 fingers on the strings that we're going to play, and then just kind of peel them off one at a time. So a little flick at this first knuckle to pick them off, but also a very slight kind of twisting of the wrist and move the wrist away. Just to get them to kind of come off one at a time, but in really quick succession. So that's measures 1 and 2. So measure 1, measure 2, letting it all ring out for as long as possible. And then measures 3 and 4, we just repeat 1 and 2. So we go back to our C major 7. We will have to change this chord ready for beat 1 because we need that open C string. So we're just going to go back to the C major 7 chord on beat 1, play the open C, back to that double stop. But again, we don't need to go straight to the G major 7 chord because we can just play that open G, and then we only need to go to the other shape just before beat 2. So those 4 measures together would sound like this. Okay, so let's try those together nice and slow, about that speed because it's a fairly slow piece anyway. So get ready on the C major 7 chord, and then on my count, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. So onto the B section now. We're going to continue with this alternating C major 7, G major 7 chords, but now we're going to introduce this beautiful delicate melody that just kind of weaves its way through these alternating chords. So for measures 5, 6 and 7, we're now playing on beats 1, 2, 3. So we're playing all 3 quarter notes in the bar for these next 3 measures. And measure 5, we're going to start with the same as measure 1, where we have this open C in the bass there, and then we're holding the C major 7 chord. So the start of bar 5 or measure 5 is just the same as measure 1. So we'll have open C on beat 1, this double stop on beat 2, but that A string at the second now, that's our first melody note for this little run, this little sequence of melody notes that we've got. So for these measures, measures 5, 6 and 7, the melody that we want to hear coming through will sound like this. Okay, so that's what we want to be hearing. So we want to make sure we pick out those notes just a little bit louder than everything else, so we really hear that coming through. So beat 1 was the open C, still fairly quiet. Then on this double stop here, if we pick out that A string just a little bit louder to really pick out that melody note there. And then on beat 3, we're going to go up to the 5th fret on the A string, and we're just going to pick that and hold it with the pinky. Just that single note there. That's on beat 3. So measure 5 is just... Okay, so then on to measure 6, we're going to come down to the 3rd fret on the A and the E string. So we're going to use these 2 fingers, the middle 2 fingers, 2nd and 3rd, and just drop those onto the A and the E at the 3rd fret. I'm going to play those 2 notes. I'm going to play those with the open G in the bass. And that's beat 1 of measure 6. And then on beat 2, we're going to go back to our G major 7 chord, and we're going to play just the top 3 strings. So we'll put the 3/4 bar across the first 3 strings with our first finger, and we'll play just those 3 notes. No bass note here, just those 3. That's on beat 2. And then on beat 3, we're just going to pick out the E string at the second, which is being held here by this first finger bar, and that's on beat 3. So that bar there would be, or that measure there, sorry, would be. Okay, so if we have a look at measures 5 and 6 together, they would sound like this. Okay, so on beat 2 of measure 6, where we play this G major 7 chord, really make sure we try and pick out that top note there, that B note, the A string at the 2nd fret. I want to hear that louder than everything else. So we're getting that sequence. Okay. So those 2 measures again. So let's try those together. We'll go about that speed. I'd say the whole piece is fairly slow anyway, it's quite a slow tempo. So when we're playing these bars through together, we'll probably just play them pretty much at normal speed. So on my count, we're going to hold the C major 7 chord to start with. On my count, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. Okay, brill. Now on to measure 7. This is probably one of the trickiest measures of the whole piece. Again, you know, the tempo is quite slow. We're still just playing 3/4 notes here, but it's more the left-hand fingering here, which is quite tricky. Because we want everything to be ringing and sustaining for as long as possible. Ideally, if we can, if we can't, there's another way I'll show you in a second, but if we can, it would be good to keep this first finger sort of 3/4 bar being held the whole way through measure 7 and measure 8. So when it goes on beat 2 of measure 6, if we can keep that held on the whole time through the next 2 measures as well, it'll just help everything ring and sustain. So we're holding it there at the end of measure 6. Then on measure 7, this is the hardest bit really, we want to take these 2 fingers and we want to drop the 3rd finger onto the C string at the 4th fret and the pinky all the way over the top onto the G string at the 5th fret. And to hold those 2 fingers there and keep this bar in place is quite tricky to hold all this. So give it a go, see how you are with it. have a little play with the wrist and the thumb. You know, don't be afraid to move the thumb around on the neck behind and move the wrist kind of up and down and round and left. Just try and get it to a point where everything's on and that's all there. I mean, that doesn't sound very good altogether as a chord, but we're not playing it as a whole chord. But just check that each note rings out fine. So when I do this, it's not very comfortable on this left hand here. I kind of bring the thumb round to the lower part of the neck and then kind of squish my hand up against the bottom of the neck there, and the wrist kind of comes out the back here. It's all just a bit awkward, if I'm honest with you. So give it a go. It's only for a short period. You know, we're only holding it for, you know, a few seconds there in measure 7. But if it's a bit too much, I'll show you another way shortly. But we'll go through these measures now with the bar being held all the way through, but then I'll show you another way after that. So on beat 1 of measure 7, we're holding that 3/4 bar there with the first finger. We've dropped these 2 fingers on, and we just want to play for beat 1, the 3rd and the 4th string, which we're holding here with these 2 fingers. We're going to play those 2 together, picking out that C string. That's the melody note we want to hear more. And then there's double stop, which we're already holding with the bar with the first finger. So the top 2 strings, play those together on beat 2. Didn't sound very good. There we go. And then we want to play on beat 3, the E string at the 3rd fret, and we'll keep everything held so it's all ringing and sustaining, and use our second finger here just to drop that onto the E string at the 3rd fret. And we'll pick out that single note there. So that measure 7 all together would sound like this. Okay. Now, whilst we're practicing this, everything's a bit slow and it's a bit laboured. That's just the way it is. If you are trying to do the maintaining the first finger bar through these measures, I wouldn't advise trying to hold it the whole time. You know, just kind of release the pressure now and then as you're trying to work out where the fingers go and looking at the music. And it's all quite slow and laboured. If we try and hold that bar the whole time, we're going to get kind of finger fatigue and hand fatigue coming in really quickly. And we don't want that. So while we're practicing, maybe just relax it, take the pressure off, go back onto it, and just keep taking the pressure off as you practice. So we'll have a look at measure 7 again. What we want to have is these 2 notes here. Okay, so that's measure 7. If we go then into measure 8, again, we're going to keep this bar being held here with the first finger. You know, it is a while, but when we play this through properly at speed, when we've got it all mastered, it's not too long that you ever have to hold this for. It always feels worse when you're practicing. So measure 8, we'll keep it going. We'll take all these other fingers off that have been on there, just leaving that bar on there, because this measure 8, we're just going back to our G major 7 chord, which is what that is there with that first finger bar across the top 3 strings. So for beat 1 of measure 8, we will play those bottom 2 strings, the C being held at the 2nd fret with the open G. And then on beat 2, we'll play this double stop here, this E and the A. Play those 2 together. And then that's it for measure 8. We're not going to play beat 3. We just let that all ring out over beat 3. Okay, so if we look at measure 7 and 8 together, it would sound like this. Okay, so in terms of finding another way to do that, if holding that bar on there is just no good for you, either it's just a bit too painful or you can't get the hand in the right shape to get these fingers on as well, without muting other strings and it feeling uncomfortable, what we could do on this bar here, so when we are on measure 6, we played these notes on beat 1, then we dropped to this first finger bar across the top 3 strings on beat 2. We will need to do that because that is the next shape, so beat 2, we'll play that. We'll leave it for the rest of measure 6 so we can play beat 3 on measure 6. But then when we come to the start of measure 7, we can take that off, let the pressure off, and just concentrate on these 2 fingers. Okay, so just as we're about to play these 2 notes, we can take that bar off. To be honest, it's probably stopped ringing at that point anyway. You know, these top strings tend not to sustain for a particularly long time, especially on a ukulele. So by the time we've played them and got these fingers on, you know, we can probably get away with taking that off anyway, in all honesty. So measure 7, beat 1, if we just concentrate on putting these 2 on, we'll play those on beat 1. And then when it comes to beat 2, we can just bar the top 2 strings. So we can just put that on there and just play those two. Now ideally do keep those on because the bass strings, especially with a low G, they do tend to ring and sustain for a bit longer. So if we can keep those on, it is going to sound a little bit better. So we can just put this bar on here, this little half bar, little hinge bar there on the A and the E strings just for beat 2. And then we could take it off to play the E string at the 3rd. Again, just to give that finger a break, take the pressure off there. And then we can put it back on. As we take all these fingers off for the start of measure 8, we can put it back on. And we can even just put it onto the C string for now, as we play beat 1 of measure 8. And then put the rest of the bar on, put the pressure on, just for beat 2. Okay, and that just works a little bit better to give your finger a bit of a break, and it probably doesn't affect the sound too much. If you can leave it on all the way through, smash it. If you can't, try that alternative technique because it might just help you. Okay, so if I show you measures 6, 7 and 8 using the kind of taking the bar off and putting it back on, we would have something like this. Okay, so that is 5, 6, 7 and 8. That's those measures covered. If we have a look at maybe all 4 of those, they would sound like this together. Okay, so just on that beat 2 there of measure 8, that last little double stop that we've played, when we're playing this, if we just make sure that that double stop is a little bit quieter, that kind of note there, beat 1 of measure 8, that's the end of that melody section, and then this little double stop is just like a gentle little filler, just to keep things going, but we don't want to hear it too loud. So just a gentle touch of those 2 strings on beat 2 there. Okay. So then on to measure 9, 10, 11 and 12. These are essentially just the same as measures 1 to 4. From the beginning of the whole piece, we're just playing those nice and quiet alternating C and G major 7 chords. The only difference is their very first note, or very first part on measure 9. Rather than just playing the open C, Satie decided it'd be a good idea to throw this really unpleasant kind of avant-garde sounding B note with the C. You know, 2 notes that, if you study music, you don't put those together. They never go together, they sound horrible. But in the context of this piece, for whatever reason, the genius of Satie, you know, it works really, really well, and I feel like the piece needs it, you know, it's part of it. So on beat 1, on measure 9 there, we're going to play the G string at the 4th fret, probably with the 3rd finger, and we're going to play that with the open C. It gives that kind of eerie sound, but when we get into the next double stop there, we're playing this A string at the 2nd with the open E, just our C major 7 chord again. It just rings out nicely and sort of goes with it really, really well. So on these 4 measures, 9, 10, 11 and 12, as I say, they're just the same as 1 to 4 for the rest of it. So we're just playing on beats 1 and 2, alternating between these C and G major 7 chords. So measure 9, but then back to the G major 7 for measure 10, back to the C major 7, and G major 7. Okay, and then again we've got some repetition going on, so measures 13, 14, 15 and 16 are just the same as 5 to 8 that we've just been through at the start of this section, so we just play that again. And that takes us there to the end of measure 17. So then the end of this B section, we just change things slightly here with the kind of sound that we're having here. We change from this kind of C and G major 7 sound that's been going on the whole time so far, and we just switch to some minor chords now. And it just changes the piece quite dramatically, I think. It really changes the feel and the mood of the whole piece. You know, the tempo doesn't change, the rhythm doesn't really change, but switching to this minor key just gives it quite a substantial, I think, different sound. So we're going to move to a B minor chord, but a little bit like before, we're going to try and be quite efficient with our finger movements, and that final measure, measure 16, we had played this G major 7 chord. That's the last thing we've played there for measure 16. But the B minor chord, all we need to do to make this a B minor chord is put this third finger on the G string at the 4th fret. So if we keep this 3/4 bar being held here, and we can pick out the E string and the G string, just those 2 strings together. So measure 17, beat 1. We play those 2 notes, that's essentially a B minor chord there. And then on beat 2, we play the other 2 strings, the C string and the A string, all being held by that chord. And that's on beat 2, and that all rings out over beat 3. For the rest of these measures now in this B section, we're just playing on beats 1 and 2, and then letting it ring out over beat 3 for all these measures. So then on to measure 18, we're then going to go to an E minor chord, but again, we can just leave this held the whole time. Take this finger off here to open up the G string again, but just play that now with the top string, the A string, being held here at the 2nd fret already. That's on beat 1. And then on beat 2, we'll drop these 2 fingers on to make it an E minor chord. So this one, 2nd finger is going to go onto the E string at the 3rd fret, 3rd finger onto the C string at the 4th, and play that double stop there, the 2 middle strings. That's on beat 2. Again, we're just going to let that ring out over beat 3. So measure 17 and 18 there, if we go back from our B minor chord, we would have, we wouldn't have that, we would have this. Okay, so let's try those 2 together. Let's try 17 and 18. So from this B minor chord, on my count, 1, 2, 3. Okay, brilliant. So then on to measure 19, again sticking with this kind of minor sound. I'm going to an A minor chord now. So what we'll do, we'll take these 2 fingers off and we'll just roll this 1st finger here onto the G string at the 2nd, and we'll play just that note on its own. So measure 19, beat 1, we're just playing that note on its own, and then we're going to play the 2 middle strings open on beat 2. Again, just let that ring out over beat 3. And then we're going to add these 2 fingers on to turn this into an A minor 7 chord. So the 2nd finger is going to go onto the E string at the 3rd, 3rd finger onto the C string at the 4th. Again, play those middle 2 strings, that double stop there. That's on beat 2. Once again, let that ring out over beat 3. And then on to the last bar of this section, the last measure of this B section, we've got a G minor chord. So all this will come off. We'll play that open G on beat 1, and then on beat 2, put on our G minor shape. So 1st finger there, A string at the 1st, 3rd finger, E string at the 3rd, 2nd finger, C string at the 2nd, and then play those 3 strings together and let that ring out there again over beat 3. So if we look at that whole minor section together from measure 17 through to the end of 21, that would sound like this. Okay, so let's have a go at that together. Just those 4 measures, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. That's 5 measures. Bad maths. Right, so we'll go from the B minor, holding that shape there, on my count, 1, 2, 3. So as with the first part of this B section, throughout this minor section, we want to make sure that we're holding each shape for as long as possible, letting everything ring and sustain right till the last minute, just before we have to change the fingering to the next shape or the next notes, whatever we're playing. So just bear that in mind all the way through. So for example, on measure 17 with this B minor chord, we play that, but then we let that ring out over beat 3, and only just at the last minute, just before beat 1 of measure 18, we take this finger off to play our E minor chord, but again, hold this on, don't take it off while we think about what's going on measure 19. You just want to hold it right to the last minute, just before beat 1, we then change to the A minor shape. So just bear that in mind, just try and keep things held for as long as possible, only changing them just at the last second before we have to play the next part. Okay, so have a play with this one, have a practice, and when you're happy with the A section and the B section and it's all sounding good and flowing, come over to the next video and we'll have a look at the rest of this piece, and the C section and the D section.
Alright guys, so this lesson was a ton of fun. This is one of my absolute favorite piano compositions, and Stephen so elegantly transposed it onto the ukulele and made it a ton of fun to play as well. So if you want to watch the part 2 lesson and learn the second half of the tune, that's going to be available by clicking this link or going to the site rockclass101.com and doing a search for Gymnopédie number 1. Don't forget that you can get the tabs on that page to print off and keep for your records, and access the really cool interactive tab player so you can highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you in the part 2 one. Take care.